So there it goes.
All right. All right, let's go ahead and get started. If you have anything on the agenda, do add it. I assume, Mitch, you probably would be interested to talk briefly about multi-cluster beta, which you requested feedback a while back. And does anybody else have any topics for today?
I don't see any on the agenda, but we can keep an eye on it, I guess.
Yeah, I don't see anything on the agenda. So, Mitch, I think I saw some comments on the multi-cluster doc. I actually took a look this morning. Apologize for the delay. I've been traveling for the past 2 weeks. I would like to be clear what are the remaining to-dos. I know it's great. We mentioned a lot of things have already been done. It's not super clear to me what are the remaining things before we can promote to multi-cluster beta. And I think one of the requirements in my mind, which I think everybody agree, if we need to enable this to be default, which I assume we wanted to, if we are gaining confidence as beta, I don't want any regression to the existing Istio ambient or sidecar if we enable this in terms of functioning regression or performance regression. So that's number one. I think number two, I think what you said, narrow the scope to be multi-network makes sense because that's the only one that's in alpha today. I do think when we hit the beta, people will expect the traffic prefer local should work and the failover should work. People should be able to, we should have a story around waypoint, which right now I don't think we have any docs on how waypoint is going to work. And I could also argue maybe the waypoint should be introduced as alpha first before we promote it to beta. So that's my other thoughts I have. The third thought, I think it's also around like feedback around hopefully we have a few users in early stage of dev testing environment and testing our alpha and be able to give us some useful feedback. I think that would help us gain the confidence of promoting to beta. So that was my major feedback. I saw Casey already replied some up to mine. But I would like kind of, highlight at the high level, what are the major things we can agree on so we could help this promote it to beta.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. For what it's worth, we did run over this in last week's Wednesday meeting, and I think we have consensus on what's left. We have a pull request outstanding to close the testing gap. We have a pull request outstanding to close the docs gap. Let's see, we did talk about getting some more user feedback that we've started to get a decent amount via GitHub issues, hearing that users are making use of it. Oh, I wanted to drill into your question about waypoints. Could you explain what you mean by waypoints not being supported in the alpha?
Okay, so maybe it could be, I remember we discussed waypoint a lot in the past, but it could be me missing the docs. I'm looking at the docs. I don't see waypoint mentioned at all in our ambient docs for ambient multi-cluster. Do we have waypoint docs for multi-cluster, but maybe it wasn't linked in like a visible way? Like I went through the guide for multi-cluster ambient today myself. I don't see waypoint being mentioned there at all.
I'd have to look back through to see what's documented. I know that waypoints are supported and tested as part of the alpha. Mike, did you have something to add there?
it could be a discovery problem for me, but I just couldn't find it. So let me quickly share my screen. So
That's a known gap as far as the docs go. We don't have waypoint docs for multi-cluster. I added a comment in the docket. I think it actually turned out to be a good thing in a way, because the way this might be what Mike K is going to talk about. The way that waypoints work in ambient multi-cluster is going to be changing. So I'm actually somewhat grateful we don't have authoritative dots
that's actually a good
for the
thing.
alpha.
I agree. Yeah.
Mike, you want to give a little bit more detail into that? If you're talking, we can't hear you. Okay, might be an audio issue on his side. But let us know when you're able to talk, Mike. But the quick version is that we talked about this in last week's working group meeting. TLDR before in the alpha right now, waypoint will make sure that traffic always goes to the waypoint of the destination, or the policy executed by the waypoint that is co-located to the destination endpoint. If we can't do that, then the request will fail. Sort of the TLDR of the existing implementation. Mike's going to change that. All right, try again, Mike.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Yes, so there is a design doc on how to make waypoints talk across clusters. It's in review, so it was linked in the working group meeting. I can link it to this one. But in terms of blockers for beta, the document in this meeting agenda is intended to capture that. There are two outstanding feature bugs that are included in this document, including the waypoint issue. And there are some other things that we kind of consider to be a blocker for beta. So if you could take a look and see if something is missing there, we can discuss.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah. So, but I guess my feedback, since we don't have documents for waypoint and also the waypoint behavior is changing, I would encourage us, once we added support for waypoint, put it out as alpha first, because I just don't feel comfortable to have that promoted to beta in the first shot, which is anti-practice of general features of the Istio, if you all agree.
Yeah, we're planning to have that land in 128, and we're targeting beta for 129.
All right, cool. Yeah, that was not super clear to me in the doc. So thanks for that clarification.
Yep.
So I guess we all agree it doesn't make sense to promote ambient multi-cluster without waypoint, right?
Yeah, it's marked as a blocker explicitly in the doc.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and then as far as, how many releases we need between alpha to beta, I think it all goes back to let's articulate the key criteria for promoting to beta, which we talk about non-regression, enable by default, and user feedback from at least a couple of users, and then some of the key multi-cluster scenario people would expect to work. I think it's good to articulate what is the basic scenario people would expect to work for beta multi-cluster for non-flat network.
For what it's worth regarding non-regression, we do have the full ambient suite now running in multi-cluster mode as well as single cluster mode, and it passes. So that suite will run tests for single cluster connectivity as well as multi-cluster connectivity. We also have a doc coming out. It's currently in review, covering the performance implications of enabling multi-cluster, which are actually, I think, better than any of us expected. It's quite performant. So those are both in progress, or well, both in review at the moment. If you wanted to take a look.
That's great. I guess one thing I'm worried about is also like when we enable this flag on default, does it break any of our upgrades or any of the configuration? Does it change any of the usability for the users today to make it harder? Because I was looking at the doc and I think it has somewhere says it requires a load balancer as a service, which I don't have it in my local testing environment. And I would like to see that addressed because I don't want to be forced to use a load balancer service in order to test the Istio ambient.
So the Istio tests today use kind for all of their test execution, and that includes the Metal LB load balancer service. So you should just be able to run make test, and you'll get a cluster that has a load balancer service with Metal LB configured.
Yeah, but I don't want to have that as a forced requirement for Meta LB. So yeah, so it would be great if that's only a requirement if I need multi-cluster. I understand that that may be needed for multi-cluster, but I don't want that Meta LB to be forced onto me when I'm not using multi-cluster. You know what I mean? It's an actual dependency for me to manage.
It's not required when you don't use multi-network, multi-cluster specifically.
Okay, yeah.
Are we
good.
sure about that? I thought our ingress tests by default, like Metal LB has been part of the test suite for more than 3 years now.
Maybe
Yeah.
for the test, but we don't require user to absolutely have it.
I think the point here is that ambient by itself doesn't need a load balancer, and we want to keep it that way. And
That is right. Yeah.
I think we all agree on that. That is true. We're just kind of looking at it at different angles.
Yep, and that's what exists today, right? And it's the same way with if you test ambient in a local cluster, you don't need a load balancer service unless you deploy an ingress. Same thing with multi-cluster. If you're testing ambient in a single cluster, and the flag is on, you don't need a load balancer service unless you have an east-west gateway. No difference there.
Okay, cool. I think we have some consensus on this topic. We just need to, Mike, can you actually tag me? You said the blockers are documented. Is that in the box section or something other place? Because I like to see them.
It's in the box section, the two box mentioned there, the
Okay.
blockers.
Okay, yeah, because what I would like to see is, regardless which concrete bug, to say these are the features we must have for multi-cluster to claim beta. So I think it would be more interesting to say, hey, I want to make sure the service can always, user can configure the service to prefer local. And I want to have user be able to configure like failover for my service, for my global service, you know, type of thing. Like as a user, I can do this. And some of this you might already accomplish too. Instead of point to one bug, because this bug might be resolved, but there may be still an issue relating to that particular function. We want to have it in the beta.
So then it sounds like what you're describing is a design doc. So the multi-network design doc covered, for instance, like prefer local and how failover works in those scenarios. Do you want us to just link to it here?
Yeah, I think it's just to have a high level of these are the items, like a checkbox we want to check off. I don't need to see the detailed design. I understood we had design docs approved, right? But this is a kind of like a validation phase to say, do we meet the criteria to claim this as a beta?
Maybe one question from me, I'm not sure I fully understand. When I say bugs there in the document, I don't mean that they're bugs in the sense that something is not working as it was intended. I include in that like definition both like issues when something doesn't work as intended and things we still want to implement. Would that cover your concerns there?
Maybe. So your bug is kind of like a missing feature, if I understood correctly. Is
One of those is like a feature request, something that we intentionally didn't implement in the alpha version, but we want to implement it for better. And another is an example of an actual like sort of behavior that we didn't think through, but we don't want it to be this way. So I would call it a bug, but it's like in general, some kind of a ticket that needs to be resolved before we go better.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a required feature for beta. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I think if you phrase that way, that's better. But we do need to think through, are these the only two things that's required for beta? And there may be listed that you already check off, which I think it would be good to put on so we know these are already being accomplished.
You mean you want some description of the features that already work and implemented?
Like a big fan feature, yeah, which I think install is one of them, right? Which we already have a doc for that. And I don't know what our plan for upgrade for multi-cluster. I think in order for us to be beta, we will need to have some story around upgrades. So that we need to think through too. And by the way, I saw the install have test enabled in our doc, so that's awesome to see.
Maybe one question on Lynn, what you said earlier. Story about upgrades. Can you clarify what you mean?
Like if I want to upgrade, when this thing goes to beta, if I want to upgrade to the next version of my Ambient, what are the process? Do I expect a downtime? What's the best practice for that upgrade, right?
Are you saying upgrading in like once we got to better, what is going to be, what are the changes to the upgrade process for Ambient? Or are you asking about like once we have a better version, how we upgrade from alpha to beta?
I think, yeah, how are we upgrading from alpha to beta is one thing, but people probably were looking at, okay, if I'm on beta, now I'm moving to the next beta +1, what are the best practice to minimize my downtime, if there's any, right? That we would have to sort through before we claim beta, because once it's beta, people would start to running in production, they would require an upgrade plus.
And if we don't introduce anything that requires any changes to the existing ambient upgrade practices, are you asking to just call it out in the document that nothing changes really?
Well, it needs to be tested before we know, yes. Right? You can't say nothing required, and I'm sure there will be strategic on what to upgrade. Like, how would you orchestrate the upgrade? Is there any strategy? Do you need to coordinate the nodes, or do you need to move your services around, right? It needs to be thought through a little bit too, right?
Well, Lynn, I guess, is there something you have in mind for what this looks like? Like, do we document this for sidecar multi-cluster upgrade orchestration, for example? I know there are lots of different ways people orchestrate their upgrades from GitOps to Terraform, and historically, my understanding has been for things like multi-cluster, we give users the ability to bring their own tools. We just, the same sort of processes apply. You upgrade your gateways or the control plane, CNI gateways in some order, and I don't think multi-cluster changes that in any significant way. And so I would think we could just sort of follow what we have for sidecar if that exists already.
So I guess I'm trying to understand, like if my cluster, let's say I have 3 cluster, right? If my one cluster is being upgraded, what's the impact to the other cluster? Does it mean maybe the control plane is upgraded and maybe the paths can still be reachable in the first cluster through multi-cluster perspective?
That's the expectation in general, yes. So once the API is stable, right, we don't expect version differences to really affect anything.
So are we saying the upgrade is transparent for the user? I don't think
it's as transparent as sidecar. I mean,
Well,
again,
and it should be as transparent as single cluster. Like in a single cluster upgrade scenario, you have a portion of time where some proxies are running version A and some proxies are running version B, and they're able to interoperate just fine. This should have the same degree of guarantees.
Exactly.
Lynn, does
So
that make sense?
yeah, I'm trying to think about would you recommend people still upgrade one cluster at a time, and then the impact would be minimum while your pods should continue work as long as there's no endpoint change, even when the
Yeah,
cluster
I
is
would
being
definitely
upgraded?
not recommend upgrading 10 clusters simultaneously in a 10 cluster mesh. That doesn't sound compatible with high availability constraints.
I think the one difference than the sidecar though is because in the sidecar case, I would have to restart the pod, right? So I know for sure my pod is going through upgrades. But in ambient, because my pod doesn't require restart, right? It's the infrastructure provided by Istio requires restart. So my mental model would be whatever pods I'm running in the first cluster that's going through upgrade, it would continuously seamless work because there's no restart for the pods. So would it be even more transparent to the user in that case? I'm just thinking loud here.
Can you clarify how like multi-cluster plays effect here? Like in the sense that what you described so far is true for ambient single clusters as well, right? The pod is not upgraded. Only infrastructure underneath is upgraded.
Right, yeah. Because we talk about sidecar upgrade. I was just thinking loud here. Would it be even more transparent in the case of multi-cluster for ambient?
I think what I'm trying to say is that I'm still like a bit lost at how multi-cluster even affects anything in this particular case, right?
I think it would maybe when you have waypoint in there. I certainly didn't give a lot of thoughts before this topic, but if we have a waypoint in this case, wouldn't the waypoint needs to be programmed any differently, or
Waypoint programming does not like depend on the version. Like that, the idea is that once we reach some stable API, like we don't need to change anything in the waypoint programming as part of the update unless we start introducing new features.
well, I think maybe you would need to is when your east-west gateway is going through an upgrade.
Again, if we upgrade east-west gateway, right, there will be some downtime for east-west gateway, right? But that's not necessarily multi-cluster related.
Well,
right?
but that's unique to multi-cluster because first of all, single cluster doesn't have that problem. Let's say if you are going through east-west gateway upgrade, would your waypoint, can your waypoint handle if the traffic was sending to that east-west and redirect?
What kind of redirect are you talking about?
Like fail over to a different one. Oh, is your waypoint intelligent to detect your gateway is down and not sending the traffic in the first place?
So there shouldn't be an overall outage during an upgrade of any gateways, east-west, ingress, or waypoint. The Istio deployment system makes sure that you have at least one healthy instance at any point in time, and that includes behind the load balancer. So that scenario should be already abnormal. That being said, if a waypoint attempts to send cluster across traffic and it fails to connect, it should then make use of our failover semantics. Does that make sense?
Yeah. By the way, how are you going to upgrade that east-west gateway? Is it Envoy based, right? Do you recommend people to use revision or in place?
So, I mean, personally, I recommend revisions everywhere, but whether you use revision or in place, the gateway upgrades the same way. When the controlling revision of the gateway, when the controlling revision of the Istio instance is restarted, the gateway will be upgraded following normal deployment semantics. And that's true of all gateway types in ambient. There's nothing unique to east-west gateways.
And that's the revision that has a different load balancer IP, or
I'm sorry, I don't follow a
Let's say-
revision.
let's say you have east-west gateway original, right? And then if you follow revision, you have east-west canary. Would each get its own load balancer IP?
So that's not the way that revisions work with gateways. Each gateway belongs to a specific revision of Istio and is upgraded when that revision upgrades. So you don't have like one gateway that has a canary revision and a default revision or something along those lines.
So you have the same IP address for the east-west gateway for the old one and the new one?
Yeah, for the very short period of time where they can exist side by side, but that's all governed by, it's the same as any other Kubernetes service behind a deployment. We don't do anything special for that.
Yeah, I ask because it has an external IP in this case.
Yes, and that's exactly how Kubernetes services with load balancer service type work.
Yeah, I want to point out here, there's, like Mitch was saying, nothing unique about the ambient portion of this. There's nothing unique about the multi-cluster portion of this. Users before ambient multi-cluster had to upgrade east-west gateways in sidecar mode. Users who used ambient before multi-cluster had to upgrade their ambient components. Everything upgrades in the same way, have the same semantics, and have the same considerations and concerns. That was sort of done on purpose in the design because Istio's got a multi-year history of doing this right, and we should reuse all of that.
Yeah,
and that means that the user doesn't need to think about anything special as they're going about an upgrade if they're in multi-cluster environment, whether it's a waypoint gateway, an ingress gateway, an east-west gateway, or if we invent some new gateway type in the future, those gateways all follow exactly the same upgrade patterns.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any difference. I do think at the minimum, it would be good to recommend, do we ask user to follow the same sequence of upgrades for single cluster?
What sequence are you thinking of, like in terms of the ordering between
The component?
Istio, ztunnel,
Yeah.
CNI?
Yeah, because right now we have an ambient upgrade page, which we're asking people to upgrade the base first, and the Istio next, and the CNI next, and the data plane. Right now, with multi-cluster, that data plane would add east-west gateway in addition to ztunnel.
That's not correct. So as soon as you've upgraded the control plane, all gateways, waypoints, ingresses, and east-west upgrade immediately if they're associated with that control plane. The data plane upgrade step in the ambient upgrade process is specific to ztunnel.
So the gateway would upgrade automatically without needing to restart or anything?
That's correct.
Yeah, because I'm looking at our doc. It says manually upgrade deployed gateway charts. Maybe that's because that gateway wasn't deployed using the gateway resource.
Correct. So there's a difference between gateway API lifecycle, which is what Mitch is describing, where the Istio is creating the actual resources. And back when we had we recommended Helm-based gateway management. But again, you can use gateway API to deploy east-west gateways today. I know some folks are already using that, both end-user customers as well as vendors. And this process works just like Mitch is describing.
Okay, cool. So sounds like we probably still recommend the same sequence as single cluster, except that we just ask people to do one cluster at a time for
Yep.
upgrade.
Yep.
By the way, do we require namespace sameness across the cluster? I assume so. Like if
Yes.
I want to reach out hello, it needs to be in the same namespace.
Sorry, can you state that last bit again?
Like in our example, I think we will deploy hello to a particular namespace, hello world, and that same hello world has to be created in the same namespace across two cluster to be able to claim reached as a global service.
That's correct.
Okay.
Identity is a combination of namespace and service account name. And that's sort of the foundation of our namespace sameness concept.
Okay, so that is a requirement for the multi-cluster to work.
Yes. Again, consistent with sidecar mode.
Yeah. I'm just ask a clarification on that. Okay, cool. Yeah. I think if I understood correctly, the biggest challenge in still is the waypoint and potentially getting some user feedback.
That makes sense.
Yeah. By the way, what about locality load balancer? I mean, that's probably after we had the waypoint support. Like
So
the
if
zone aware load balancer.
Kubernetes already has a component of locality aware load balancing, which is the prefer close setting that you can set on each service, and we respect that. Beyond that, we don't have the same support that Sidecar has for locality aware load balancing. That is something that we would like to add, and I think I've shared a doc, Lynn, with you and Louis and John on some steps towards solving that, but I haven't, it's not quite ready for public sharing yet.
Okay, so that's not staged for the beta. That's
Well,
kind of
to be
to follow up.
To be clear, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. If we implement your proposal for waypoints, we will have support for locality load balancer destination rule applied at the waypoint, correct?
The destination rule will respect waypoint will respect destination rules. Yes.
Yeah. So we will have
cool.
similar failover, splitting out loud detection, etc. Like we do for
Yes.
sidecars, just slightly different.
There is a non-multi-cluster specific caveat here, right? In ambient, you have waypoints and ztonal in some cases, right? The destination rules do not apply to ztonal. That's not really a multi-cluster specific concern. It's a thing of ztonal.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you want that, you deploy a waypoint, just like any other L7 thing, basically, that we have in ambient.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I think we're beating this topic pretty hard. Is there any other topic we should be discussing, or does anybody have any other question on this multi-cluster beta doc? Gustava, I think you added a topic. Do you want to go through that quickly?
Thank you, Lynn. Yeah, okay. Can you hear me?
A little bit vague, I think.
Okay, so
I don't know if it's my network too, so try it again.
The same for me.
Okay.
okay, is it any better?
I don't know. It's like you come from a closet or something.
Yeah, that's weird. Do you want to take over, Jackie?
Yeah, I can take over. Sorry.
Thank
I'm
you.
sick.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. I'm sick, so I don't sound the best. But so I think we were just asking, or just reminding that we're working on the dynamic. We're working on support for wildcards and service entries in ambient mode. we have a API PR out that needs TOC review. Ian's been providing really helpful feedback on that, but if other folks could take a look, that's linked in the doc. It's for adding support for a dynamic DNS resolution type. And then once that's merged, the test for the POC, which I marked as ready for review now, will pass, and so we can take another pass at that. But the POC is there. It's we're getting it's ready for initial review and feedback. So any thoughts on that would be great. But again, yeah, just everything will be more clear once the dynamic DNS API change is merged.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks for that. I saw Ian had some good comments along with Keith.
Yeah, I think ultimately we just want to make sure that that's why I appreciate Ian pushing on this. I want to make sure it's really clear, the intent for the dynamic DNS, and that the behavior is very clear when you enable that, what you're going to be expecting. I just want to make sure that's as clear as possible for the users.
Is my mic any better now?
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
thanks, better, Gustavo.
Okay. Now I just wanted to point out that what the POC is doing at the moment, it works with HTTP service entries, right? And it uses TLS origination on the way out. So just giving some extra context there. That's it.
Or it has support for TLS origination.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice. All right. Thank you, Jackie and Gustavo.
Thank you.
Anything else we should be discussing, or we give 15 minutes back to everybody?
Mitch, did you have a timeline where you wanted to get TOC feedback on the doc? I've gone ahead and approved modulo other members' comments because this looks good to me.
Yeah,
but if you have
we agreed that if it wasn't reviewed by last Monday, that it was approved by default in the channel. So we're good there.
Wait, this is the beta doc?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, sorry for not, but I think
That's all right. I know you've been really busy. It's okay.
I think the feedback has been clear. I do think it's going to be harder to approve per release. We have to see how the waypoint lands first to determine which release is appropriate for beta.
I think approving that doc doesn't mean that we mark multi-cluster as beta. It just finalizes the conditions that we will use to mark it as beta.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. I agree. So yeah, it's good we don't tie the releases in there. I do think right now the doc is not clear. The waypoint needs to progress to alpha first. So I would appreciate we make that clear.
I guess to be clear, the current alpha version of multi-cluster today does support waypoints. Waypoint support, there wasn't a doc for it.
Yeah, but
waypoint support.
without doc, nobody is using it basically. So I don't think you'll be able to get any feedback without the doc. So
I'm not
I
sure
mean, I
that's
think-
the case.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So like waypoints work just like anything else does. We didn't document how HTTP routes work or how authorization policies work, but we're still seeing folks use them in their multi-cluster installations. What changes when you install a multi-cluster is that you now have multi-cluster connectivity. The individual components continue working in the same way that they do in single cluster mode. And I don't think it would be a good idea for us to reproduce our entire documentation tree with a multi-cluster perspective.
Right, like we don't have sidecar multi-cluster docs for every sidecar feature. We just, when we launched, we didn't put, our demo just didn't happen to show a waypoint or sort of walk users through the exact semantics. So my understanding, just like everything else, is that multi-cluster with waypoints is alpha. we are changing those semantics on how waypoints work. So when the next release where we do that would still be alpha, and then once we've had at least one release of feedback, then we could look at user feedback, see if any bugs were introduced or performance issues, and then progress that to beta.
But this is different than sidecar though, because in sidecar, I don't need to worry about where to deploy my waypoint. This I do need to worry about. So I think it's very important to have docs and guidance for it.
Okay, well, we
I agree.
We can certainly add a doc on waypoint placement. I think that's fair.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Docs are a requirement for beta for sure. So we certainly need to have those docs. My point earlier was that I would personally prefer to not actually have a waypoint semantic doc about when you send traffic to a service that has a waypoint, which cluster does it terminate in? That's going to change next release. So I almost feel like it's better to not document the behavior today, just to change.
Oh yeah,
it
because we're changing it, right? Yeah, that
exactly.
makes sense. Yeah.
But
it doesn't mean it's not supported now. I think that's what you were trying to say before, Keith.
Exactly. So it's supported now. We don't document. I mean, there are lots of feature flags and things like that or features that we support in alpha that are in alpha and that aren't documented. The cluster local service settings field is as one example is alpha and not documented at all on our docs page. So my understanding, and I would say that waypoints are alpha today. We're going to keep them alpha for release as we change the behavior, because alpha is when you change behavior of things, make API changes or contract changes, and then after feedback, we'll progress it to beta once that, and there should not be a contract change during that progression from alpha to beta.
Okay, that's
Lynn,
fair.
I'll add a section under documentation to make sure that we do add documentation for waypoint behavior in the upcoming release.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks. All right, thank you all for that clarification. Should we wrap this up? Give you all 10 minutes back. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, folks.